Welcome to Spark Infinity Office Hours. It is September 12th, 2024, and I'm David Andrew Wiebe. Today we're going to be looking at fine-tuning and micro adjustments. So why are we talking about fine-tuning and micro adjustments? In my own work, I've been quick to identify flawed processes and unworkability, which has led to quick innovation. I'm studying a lot. I'm taking a lot of courses. I'm looking outside of the convention of the ways I've always done things, continue to do things. There's a lot of tools that I love. There's a lot of processes and approaches that I love. But gradually and bit by bit, day by day, I find myself adjusting these processes based on what I'm learning, as well as the new tools that I've been bringing into the fold. I want to give you an example. So I had this invoicing system that for whatever reason allowed my customers to make payments in Canadian dollars, which is my native currency, but not in US dollars. Which this presents a massive unworkability for me, primarily for the reason that most of my customers I do charge in US dollars. Most of my customers aren't in Canada. At least many of my customers. There are certainly some partners and collaborators and the occasional customer in Canada, but the vast majority are not in Canada. That's one of the reasons why I charge in US dollars. And pretty much all my products too are in US dollars. So after encountering the same issue 3 times, you think I might have clued in a little sooner than this, but I allowed it to happen 3 times. I finally realized and decided it was time for me to find a new invoicing solution, especially since I had a client who wanted to pay me then and there. I must have submitted my work well after 9 o'clock, probably something like 9:30 at night. And my client was right on it. He's like, I want to pay you right away, but I can't because your invoicing system doesn't allow it. And that's when I finally said, that's enough. This has happened 2 or 3 times now. I've asked others to find workarounds instead of presenting them with a solution that works outright. And so I finally purchased a professional invoicing system. I didn't hate the one that I was using. I have no reason to badmouth them. But the fact that, well, there are 2 major things I would say that there was a good reason for me to leave them behind. One of them is the reason that I just mentioned, the fact that I can't collect US dollars. And then the second thing was I had a lot of stuck money in that invoicing system. Yes, I was able to pull it out earlier this year at exactly a time when I really, really needed it because I was going through some tough times. But I didn't know that that was happening. What prompted me to look was I charged a client for a certain amount of money and they said they had paid, but it had not made it into my bank account. Well, when you're going through difficult times, you're watching your bank account like a fox going like, where is that money? Where is that money? And I'm like, it shouldn't take this long. So I reconnected at the advice of customer support. I reconnected my card, at which point the payments were released and over $3,000 made its way into my bank account. Those would be 2 reasons to leave them behind. Again, still not going to badmouth them, but it was time to move over and adopt a proper professional solution that I could also use to handle my accounting with. I mean, the more you can automate, the better. So there's a real life example. That's not the only thing that happened. Have been many fine-tuning opportunities, micro adjustment opportunities in the last few weeks or the last month or 2 or so. And I'll get into some more examples later, but that's just one example that I want to share with you so you'd have proper context for what we're talking about here. Now, when I finally did replace my invoicing system, it got me thinking about the fact that if we want to find a pathway with social media, now some of us don't actually want to find a pathway, am I right? Some of us are happy with where we are, or we just want to stay with the status quo because it's easier than shaking things up. But for those who are genuinely interested in growing in social media growth, if you want to find a pathway for that, and if you want to optimize your strategy, you got to be willing to fine tune and make micro adjustments. Everything you do on social media is giving you feedback. Even the lack of a reaction is a form of feedback. Am I right? So if you're not getting any comments, if you're not getting people engaged with your posts, that is already giving you some feedback that you can work into the equation and to make that adjustment. So I want to talk about some of the benefits of fine-tuning and micro-adjusting, at least in the specific approach or the specific way that I've gone about it, that I have been going about it. So one of the benefits of this approach is it reduces the stress of having to make huge changes now. I think so often we're looking for the instant win button You know, like if I could just hit this one note and repeat that note and everybody would deem me successful and think of me as a god and pay me incredible sums of money, I would just be happy. And not only does that push button success not really exist, it's really difficult to make those kinds of macro changes instantly. But what you can do is make micro adjustments today, right? Maybe I can't turn 90 degrees to the left, but depending on the amount of time and effort I put into it, maybe I can make a 0.1 or 0.2 degree adjustment to the left. And over time, over the course of days, months, or days, weeks, and months, as the case might be, and possibly years, I will have made that 90 degree turn. So when you make fine tuning and micro adjusting the priority, you're not trying to make that massive change immediately in your strategy or your business or your career. You're just looking for that 0.1 or 0.2 degree adjustment that you can make every day or every week. It does make a big difference long term for the reason that I've just mentioned. If you make a massive shift today, the challenge is often that you also have to adopt new frameworks, new processes, new approaches. You have to adjust your own workflow. So if you switch from one tool to another tool today, you're going to have to learn that new tool, however powerful it may be. Maybe it's way better than what you're currently using. Maybe it's way better than what you've currently got. But because you have to make an adjustment in your personal workflow into how it fits in and learn an entirely new platform, that can slow you down. But if you make the micro adjustments towards that platform, it really can take the stress out of things. So making a big difference long term, I've always thought of it as being consistent, right? In simple terms, it's not exactly a sexy concept by any means, but it is far easier, let's say, to write 500 words for a book today and keep doing that every day versus trying to write an entire book or half a book today. In fact, that's pretty impractical anyway. So the big difference that it makes long term is what we want to keep in mind. I think fine tuning and micro adjusting also creates a greater awareness of opportunity because you're not just looking at things that you've already done. You're also taking in fresh input. I feel like that's a really important part of this is novel input. Dan Kennedy talks a bit about this in something called The Phenomenon, which if you have the opportunity to listen to it, do so because it's really incredible. And I think it possibly this philosophy of fine tuning and micro adjusting that I've arrived at comes from The Phenomenon a little bit. But you become aware of more things because you're like, you're more open. You're more open to change. Like maybe this tool would work for me. Or I wonder if there's a tool that does this. You've never explored that before. Or maybe I could approach this problem this way instead of the way that I've always done it. And then you start to see, oh my gosh, I've been missing so many things, or this could speed things up for me. It's kind of surprising to me that after all these years, I've been using Microsoft Word for as long as I can remember, probably since I was a teenager. And I sometimes still stumble upon things where I go, holy cow, like that would boost my efficiency. But we have to be open to learning, right? And being open to learning is sometimes combing through a lot of junk, a lot of stuff that says nothing, hours and hours and hours of content to find like one thing. But I have the willingness to do that again, partially because of what I've learned from Dan Kennedy. That's what he did too. He would go through hours of Earl Nightingale material to find one piece or one concept that made all the difference for him. And I now have that willingness too to sift through a lot of nonsense or stuff I already know to find the one little breakthrough that can make all the difference. Another major benefit, this would be easy to overlook, I think, is this micro-adjusting approach. It keeps you free and clear of the insanity cycle. The insanity cycle is doing the same things, expecting different results. Perhaps some of you have cranked out like 100 videos and none of them have really gone viral. Maybe some have gotten more views than others, like 20 views or 500 views. Maybe even one got 1,000 views, but none of it really added up to the kind of success you were looking for. Like on YouTube, that would mostly be subscriber count. View count is important too, but if you were looking to grow a subscriber base, like 1,000 is kind of your first major milestone because that's when you can finally monetize your channel. You made 100 videos and none of them help you get there. And in fact, your performance overall is not improving. It would be because you're not making those micro adjustments. Now, I think something could be said for, especially when it comes to something like YouTube and publishing videos. It's well worth going through the process of publishing 100 videos no matter what, especially if you're just getting started, because you're going to learn your voice, you're going to learn your approach, you're going to figure out how to present the topic, and you're going to suck a lot at first, but you're going to suck a lot less as you continue on. So I find that this micro adjusting approach will help you steer clear of doing the same thing, expecting different results, because you're constantly on the lookout for what could make the difference here. Another benefit, adjusting to real-time information and circumstances. My invoicing example from earlier is the perfect example to refer to. I could have sat there and gone, oh, that's just the way things are. This is my invoicing system. And, kind of played victim to the whole situation without recognizing that I actually have options, which I do. It's not like I'm trying to rush out to add another bill to my list, another subscription to my list. And at the same time, it's like someone wants to pay me right away. And the amount that they're looking to pay me is going to cover, I don't know, 5 to 10 years of subscription for that invoicing software. So sometimes you gotta look at things that way, that making that adjustment is going to have things run a lot smoother. I mean, and especially when it comes to something like invoicing or getting paid, it is so important to reduce and eliminate friction from that process, wouldn't you say? So as information comes in, what happens, this may really seem obvious to all of you independents out there, or entrepreneurs, like people doing things for themselves. You may not find it difficult to make micro adjustments, whereas big companies have these big dumb companies really have all these policies in place and that prevent them from making these kinds of drastic changes. For them, it would be drastic to completely rewrite the standard operating procedure and have people go about things in their company in a different way. It's really a nightmare, because then you're like, okay, we have to implement the software. We have to make employees aware of the new software. We have to switch over the employees to the new software. Then we've got to train them on their new software. Doesn't that sound nightmarish already? But when you're acting with agency, this can be done quickly. And because of that, adjusting to real-time situations and circumstances allows you to meet the challenge or the issue head on and make a course correction that'll make a big difference. Another benefit, implementation of better solutions leads to better results. Well, again, I could turn to that example of the invoicing solution again, that the one solution was not allowing me to get paid immediately, but the new solution does and did. Now, I had to confirm some things with Stripe. So unfortunately, that payment is going to hit my bank account about a week and a half after it was originally paid. But moving forward, that's probably not going to be much of a hiccup. Let's say that right now you're using a solution that allows you to schedule tweets. Well, that's all good and well. But what if you could find a tool that allowed you to schedule social media posts, like ones that specifically cater to that style of content, like Threads or other short form blogging platforms, where you could post to 5 networks or 6 networks at the same time, or schedule posts for all those networks simultaneously? Wouldn't that lead to improvement? Now, I can't say just because you have 5 or 6 platforms versus the original one that you're going to get 5x or 6x the results that you're getting right now. But again, long-term thinking would say, okay, like that would allow me to build followings on multiple platforms where my audience potentially is, build a relationship with them, create connections, increase my subscribers, get sales. Is it worth doing? So better solutions, they're well worth looking for and keeping an eye open for them. Doesn't mean like you have to run out and buy them today, right? That's not what we're talking about. It could literally be, oh, this solution might work for me. I'm going to go save it in my bookmarks. Well, that's an action that was well worth the effort, especially if you return to that bookmark and then evaluate. That's a great way to make a micro adjustment rather than a sudden change, right? This approach also allows you to gain knowledge and skills. Now, I don't want to present this as if it's all about research, because it's not, but I think there's a component of learning to it. And this is another thing that I kind of want to throw into the mix, because it might explain how my mindset has shifted around this, which is I really think every entrepreneur, and by extension, every artist, because let's face it, we're all entrepreneurs, needs a Udemy subscription. Because whatever you don't know, you can go and learn. And the bottom line is, even if you're a really busy person, you can play that course in the background and your subconscious mind is going to start to absorb things. It's going to learn things. It's going to discover things. It's going to start finding new connections without you really having to do a whole lot else. It's going to do that on autopilot. And then occasionally you're going to hear a thing or two, especially if you're a knowledgeable person. You're not going to constantly find new things to implement, but you're going to grab on to a couple of things here and there in these courses where you're like, oh, I didn't know that. I could go implement that right now. I had stuff like that. So that Udemy subscription makes for a powerful, powerful accompaniment to this whole approach. Another benefit, it helps you accomplish things you might not otherwise get around to. It's actually pretty surprising to me. The weird thing about this is, like, I think the fine-tuning and micro-adjusting approach is rapid. It's fast. A lot of companies, for reasons like I mentioned earlier, are not very agile. They can't just pick up and change things because there's an entire structure and a process in place. And people get so used to doing things a certain way that revolutionizing that process can it can really confuse your team for a while. And it can also create a lot of resistance with your team. But if you've got agency, holy cow, like, you can move fast with this stuff. And moving fast would allow you to accomplish a lot of things that big companies just wouldn't be able to. So whether it's updating blog posts, which is something that I really wasn't sure I'd ever get around to, or like making small adjustments to my homepage, like adding a picture next to my main call to action, felt like that was kind of an important thing to do. Still testing it. I don't know if that photo is going to help get more signups, but I'm trying it because, hey, I think photos of smiling people, those are kind of automatic wins in the internet space. Using photos in general is a good idea. People like that media. They don't just want to read things, right? But I don't know if it's going to do anything. But instead of sitting in the back of my mind as an idea, or sitting on one of my to-do lists that's deep in a box somewhere where I can't find it, I'm going and doing it and implementing it because I'm staying open to the possibility that maybe this is the little tweak, maybe this is the little adjustment that leads to unprecedented and unexpected results. Another really awesome benefit, it allows for creative fusion and alchemy to occur. I think this is something we're constantly looking to do as artists, is we're looking for ways to combine our various interests and skills and bring them together as a cohesive whole. And that will create a strategic advantage, or at least that's the thinking, that if we can successfully meld all these things together and bring them to the world in a way that would be surprising and unexpected, but also delightful, that we would somehow find success. And whether or not that's true, I think this micro adjusting approach would allow you to make more connections like that faster. And it's definitely not about being perfect. As far as I'm concerned, there's a little bit of messiness that should accompany this entire process. I think of it as messy. I will not execute every single idea as it comes to me immediately. I will jot things down, but I'm not trying to be careful or exact about where these ideas are going. I'll sometimes open a notepad on my desktop and put ideas there. I'll sometimes grab my yellow legal pad and jot down ideas there. I'll sometimes grab my notebook and jot down ideas there. I'm not trying to be perfect. That's not the point. I think moving with urgency is definitely one of the keys here. And it's also kind of one of our values in Spark Infinity, is moving fast. But as this is happening, as you're going through the process of learning and taking courses on Udemy, as you're identifying things that you have yet to implement, things that you're going to implement, things you want to try, and ideas are coming to you, you're quickly jotting them down, making note of them, maybe sometimes implementing them right away. And many times, like, you're implementing them, I think you'll find yourself, as you get into the flow of this, you'll find yourself implementing these ideas very, very quickly. So the synthesis of ideas can happen very fast, and it's really cool when it happens too. This approach also helps you learn to adapt faster, and that's definitely a byproduct of learning to move quickly as well. Things are changing much too fast in the world right now with technology and AI, and tools are popping up much too quickly for people to be able to keep up with it all. Now, is it everything it's cracked up to be? I don't know yet. Maybe the tools can expand and grow and improve beyond what they are right now. I'm a little skeptical. I'm not skeptical that technology will continue to improve. I think it will. I think we're going to find new and innovative ways of going about it. But it seems like technology in the last 10, 20, 30 years, and it could even be longer than that, where we've been trying to replace one idea that's not really working with another idea that ultimately is not quite working. And so we've found an iterative way of approaching technology and making it better, but we haven't found an innovative way of bringing about new tools that will actually revolutionize things. The way AI works right now, I don't really think with the current feedback system that it's going to spontaneously achieve sentience. I don't see that happening. So we'd have to start thinking about the problem differently to get to that point. Even so, I mean, tools are certainly at a point where we can create lots of content using AI and do it at scale and do it faster than ever before. Is it always good? No. Is it always in our voice? No. Is it always what we need? No. But we can certainly move faster. I still like creating things that are ultimately satisfying to me and things that I can be proud of. I'm not trying to take any shortcuts. In saying that, I think there definitely is a time and place for AI. I do think everyone should be experimenting and playing with it if they aren't already. There's very good reason to keep pace and to use this stuff as an assistant, a second pair of eyes, an editor, someone to bounce ideas off of. It's exhibited great value in those domains as far as I'm concerned. Fine-tuning and micro-adjusting can also help you save time. This kind of goes back to some of the things I've talked about already, but you're going to find new, innovative, more efficient ways of doing things as you continue to explore, because you're constantly on that trajectory of learning and micro-adjusting based on what you're learning. This is fundamentally an entrepreneurial approach as well. That's another benefit, and I will go deeper into that and illustrate it through story a little bit later. But artists so often have trouble kind of adopting that entrepreneur's mindset. They have trouble putting away the artist hat when they need to put their marketer hat on, or when they need to put their entrepreneur hat on to make connections or to create an offer or structure a deal, whatever it might be. The artist hat is great for when you're creating and making things. It's not so great when you're trying to market something or when you're trying to structure a deal or when trying to negotiate or network and things like that. We need to be able to think differently about different subjects. And fine-tuning and micro-adjusting is a very entrepreneurial approach for reasons we'll get into. Finally, a perfectionist approach just doesn't work. You can't be fine-tuning and micro-adjusting in the way that I've talked about, because there's moving with urgency. There's being messy, like I talked about. It's like jotting ideas down, writing things down, throwing things away, just being quick, super fast, implementing this, trying that. There's no slowing down here. Every day is like a micro-adjustment towards something that you're creating. So if you're stuck in a perfectionist mindset, this could be one way to help you get out of it, because there's simply no room for it. Are there pitfalls to fine-tuning and micro-adjusting? I gave this some thought, and I think there are some potential pitfalls. And these are what they are. One is that it can confuse your audience. It doesn't have to, right? But I know in my case, this has perhaps happened. Maybe it's nowhere near the scale that I sometimes think it is in my mind, because I haven't really confirmed this with some of my audience, but I feel like sometimes they have a little trouble following where I'm going with things. It's not like one day I'm talking about success in music and the next day I'm talking about strawberry shortcakes. I've never made that kind of drastic move, but I have made some moves that perhaps would confuse people. And that's perhaps just a flaw or an eccentricity or idiosyncrasy of who I am and the way I go about things. I feel like I'm on a mission, or I don't even know if it's a mission. It's just like something that's built in or baked into who I am, to want to constantly learn and evolve and improve. So I think as long as you're careful about making sure that what you're producing is still going to resonate with your audience, it's really no problems there. Next is, it can be exhausting. It really doesn't have to be, but some of the things that I've talked about, I think there are people who would find it exhausting to try to constantly make those adjustments, to be constantly thinking about how I can improve or innovate, learning more stuff, filling your mind with more things, much of which, let's just face it, you're going to discard huge chunks of it, especially if you're pretty well self-educated with a lot of personal development and business and marketing and social media and all that kind of stuff. You're going to discard a lot. but digging for the gold, at least to me, is worth it if it's forced, if you're pushing yourself to do it, if it's not really in the sweet spot as far as like having fun and joy while doing the work, because action honestly is supposed to be fun. And you might want to reconsider what you're doing if the action isn't fun. That's probably your intuition telling you something. It can be exhausting if done the wrong way. Another thing is that fine-tuning and micro-adjusting could lead to analysis paralysis. That's really the thing that we want to avoid here. Like if you're comparison shopping 3 different tools or 5 different tools to schedule your social media posts, just as an example, that sort of analysis, I just find a lot of people are going to sit with that decision forever because they're like, well, the price is this, but this one has this feature. But I kind of like this one because it connects to this network and none of the other tools connect to that network. Instead of saying, okay, this week, I'm going to try a free trial with tool number 1. Week number 2, I'm going to start a free trial with tool number 2 and just keep going through the tools, keep doing the free trials until you kind of have a sense of what they are, what they do, and which one you like. So that's where it could lead to analysis paralysis, but you just got to get your thinking straight on that one. Another one is probably perpetually a pitfall. And it's a pitfall of any approach, which is that you're not guaranteed to get better results. I would argue, though, like in my case, if we're replacing your invoicing system so that you can get paid immediately, your results are going to improve. There's just no way they're not going to. But that's kind of a macro example. A micro example with social media is certainly like just because you're posting more doesn't mean you're guaranteed better results. Just because you're posting at times when you're supposed to be posting or everyone says are effective times or the AI is telling you to post doesn't mean you're guaranteed better results. So I don't know if there's a workaround for that one, but I would say if you're adopting this as a general approach to everything to do with your career and business, then I would argue that there are guaranteed results. So I kind of hinted at this already, but I just want to make sure you're aware. There is a way to navigate each of these pitfalls. I already kind of covered how you might go about that, but suffice to say, where there's a will, there's a way. Things are going to come up on this journey, things that you don't always like, but that's going to come up whether you're taking this approach or not. So you might as well have an approach that's adaptive and agile and fun and one that suits you. So here's a real example from my Instagram accounts. Last time I shared about how numbers always tell a story, and I hadn't really done a deep dive into my stats yet. And I can honestly say I still haven't done a quote unquote deep dive into it, but I've been spending a little more time staring at them just to figure out what I could see. So this is something that I didn't notice before, and this is just under views. So it shows views by content type towards the bottom. And so what I noticed now there's 3 different categories. You can organize by content type, all followers or non-followers. At first, I was just looking at all. And what it showed me was that, my stories get seen by way more people. They get way more views than reels or posts or videos. Videos, barely anything, and reels, barely, not much either. Although it's interesting how I don't have a lot of reels and videos. So just the fact that reels actually outperforms posts, it was a bit of a surprise. But what that tells me is that simple habit of logging in and finding a few things from my own post and maybe the posts of other people that I'm following. I'm following people who publish the kind of things that I like. If I just keep adding those to my stories, that's a good way to keep those views up. That's one of the things that I realized. When I moved over to non-followers, though, I saw that my post was the number one thing that was engaged, then reels, then stories, and then videos. Again, there's somewhat of a bias there, just in the sense that I'm not posting that many reels and videos, so that's going to factor into the equation. But it does give me a sense of little habits, right? And that's what this is all about. That gives me a sense of little habits to keep in play. So adjusting to the data available allows you to optimize your strategy. But you've got to home in on the reasons why one post is outperforming the other. Even when it comes to analysis, I think this is tricky business, right? We want to learn as much as we can. This is another situation where Udemy courses are going to help you interpret your data in a way that's actually productive. It's still well worth digging into this yourself just to see what you can figure out before you turn to other experts to see what they can see in what you've created so far. So I want to share a little bit of some real life experiences that also have led me in this direction. And this is a conversation I had with an aspiring entrepreneur. I think you'll see why it's relevant here in a moment. But I met with my grade 6 teacher's youngest son from Japan for lunch last Saturday. So he's been in Vancouver for about a month studying, so going to school, working, and interning. And he said he'd like to be able to create the kind of life and live the kind of life that I have now. Now, I'm not here to brag about my life, but I also don't want to downplay the fact that what I've got right now is pretty darn cool. I'm living in an 800 square foot suite, which is pretty luxurious and spacious. I've got a great day job at big tech. It's a cushy role, it pays a lot. There's definitely advancement opportunities. And not to mention, everything else that I've achieved to this point still stands. The many books I've published, I'm up to 9 now. And I have become a best-selling author a few times on Amazon and Kobo. I'm an award-winning composer, and the many, many, many pieces of content I've turned out, whether on social media or blogs or podcasts or videos, are still very much in play. So it's at least somewhat understandable. And also, he's a Japanese person. So to Japanese people, cars are kind of luxuries. So for him, it's pretty incredible that I would even have a car. But let's face it, most people in North America have a car. So that in itself isn't like a major accomplishment, but that might be a slight bias that he has. I'm not saying he does, but he might. So he was mentioning how he was interning with one business owner, like I mentioned earlier, and he observed how they were constantly looking around at what other people were doing and thinking to themselves, oh, maybe we should implement that in our business. Or how could I apply this idea to my business? And I kind of smirked and laughed a little because this is really true of my experience of entrepreneurs as well, like people in my circle. I'll go to hang out with them maybe on the weekend or whatever. We'll be driving around in a car from their home to a restaurant or wherever we might be going to hang out. And they can't shut it off. They're talking about something that happened in their business that day or something to do with their client or something that they're struggling with and they're trying to figure out, or maybe the need for coaching or mentorship. So this is exactly how an entrepreneur is thinking. And so it really plays into everything we've talked about here today. And this is what I said to him. Entrepreneurs aren't thinking about how to Kaizen over the course of 3 months. They're thinking about how to Kaizen every single day. So Kaizen is a term that has often been interpreted in English as like gradual but continual improvement. I would simply say it's actually continual improvement. And having grown up in Japan, my understanding of that term, Kaizen, is actually clean slate and plus improvement. It's almost like you're getting everything out of the way that doesn't need to be there to make the thing as good as it can possibly be. That's the way I've always interpreted that term. So if you were every day getting everything that doesn't need to be there out of the way, you would only be left with the essentials. That might be just the essential habits or the essential tasks or the essential gear or the essential website elements, whatever that would be. But if you were constantly moving in that direction of clean slate and improving, what could be possible? So I think that quote alone, or the thing that I said to him alone, was worth. It might have been a long walk for a short drink, but I wanted to add that in there. Another thing that I wanted to add in here was I went to the Sold Out Living Color and Extreme concert on Tuesday night in Vancouver. That was at the Commodore Ballroom, which I was looking online, going, "Is this? I don't know what is the structure of this place? Is it big? Is it small?" And I don't know. I think it has a capacity of a few hundred people, possibly 1,000 people. So not massive, but pretty big. The band Extreme, they got their start in 1985, and they did go on hiatus in 1996, but they've been active again since 2007. They did reunions between 2004 and 2006, I believe. And at one point, and this was really jokingly, it wasn't really in an angry way, Nuno, Extreme's guitarist, mentioned that it had taken them 38 years to get to this point of playing sold out clubs. And I believe them. Like, they did achieve a certain level of popularity and success in their initial run in their career. More Than Words, obviously, was a pretty significant success, and you could still hear it on the radio today. But it was nowhere near the level of support they now have. And I feel like I've been converting people to Extreme for like over 20 years now. Because when I first learned about them and listened to them, I was like, dear Lord, there's a lot of incredible guitar stuff in here. And not just that, like incredible musical ideas executed at a high level. That's really what blew me away. And by the way, I had a great time at this show. And pictured in my presentation here is K-Fig's stick. He threw some drumsticks into the crowd, and I managed to snag one of them. So I consider myself very lucky. But yeah, I was bouncing, I was jumping, I was dancing, I was getting absorbed in the music, I was singing along. It was a great, great, great time. This is really what I felt at the end of it all. Even if no one knows who you are now, if you keep doing good work, you will be rewarded for it. It hopefully doesn't take 38 years like extreme, but if you keep doing the good work, of course, you've got to be rewarded for it. There just is no other way. It's like a law. I feel like this is where, and this might actually be the greatest value you derive from this whole thing, is like tuning and adjusting your attitude. It's so easy to roll your eyes at social media. It's so easy to cringe and go like, oh my God, yeah, social media. Feel exhausted about having to create one more post. And my suggestion would be to tune and adjust that attitude, because this is the way I started thinking after going to that extreme concert and being inspired by it. I started thinking to myself, like, if not this, then what? And if not now, then when? So my recommendation, reignite your passion for your work and do it. Engage in the work and focus on the journey, not on the destination, because the journey is the reward. This is probably the greatest return on investment in fine tuning and adjusting. Is changing your attitude. I'll briefly touch on some of the results. It's not like I'm seeing a huge increase in sales. It's not like I'm seeing a huge increase in traffic, although I have seen some traffic increase. I think over time, it's all going to start to add up. But what I will say is some of the cool things that have happened or have come out of this so far. One is that I started drawing out my org charts, organization chart, like where I am in relation to the rest of my team and who is the rest of my team. And right now, the rest of my team, good chunks of it are, oh, this person can do audiobooks for me, like a voice actor. Here's an AI that can handle this task for me. Here's another tool I'm going to use for social media marketing. That's what my org chart's starting to look like. But I can start to see all the different elements being filled, and it's really cool. I found out some great new tools I never knew about. Might have the opportunity to talk about those in a future Spark Infinity office hours. I replaced my invoicing software like I talked about earlier, but the kind of the weird thing or the cool thing about that was when I did that, I also got a feeling internally that I was starting business for real, not like pretend business or a hobby. I felt like I was really doing this for real now. I went from publishing and sharing content on 5 channels to 11 channels per week. And it's not necessarily because I'm working that much harder. It's a huge portion of that is because of the tools and efficiency hacks I've been discovering. Another result, like I don't put it off until later. Last night was the perfect example because I scheduled social media posts, scheduled 2 email campaigns, continued editing my latest book, and began work on this presentation. Did I have to do all that? Maybe not, but I've made a commitment to myself, right? And I was tired, but I can't just talk about passion, right? I actually have to go and live it. And that's why I went and did the work. And finally, if there's something I don't know, I've really realized, or if I'm stuck on something, I can go learn about it. Go take a Udemy course. Doesn't mean that I have to be the one implementing it, but if I can have a breakthrough in knowing that it's possible, that alone can be the breakthrough that I need. So a couple of questions to ponder in closing. Could a fine-tuning and micro-adjusting approach like I talked about here work for you? And if it did, how would it transform your career or business if you were constantly looking for ways to do things better? Thanks so much for joining me for this office hours. Let me know what you thought. Drop a comment. And don't forget to follow me on Instagram where this is all unfolding at David Andrew Wiebe, Wiebe.